With us now to talk more about this, Brendan Buck, former press secretary to former House Speaker John Boehner and 2012 GOP vice presidential nominee Paul Ryan. He is also an MSNBC political analyst. And Maya Rupert, former senior advisor to the Warren campaign and former campaign manager for Julian Castro. She is also the author of the Substack Power Breakers. So, Brendan, Trump seems to now be saying he's not interested in another debate with Vice President Harris. How do you see this?
Yeah, I'm not sure I believe him. He may not want to do a debate now, but he's probably going to find out that he has to. You know, you only have so many opportunities to change the direction of a race, and he clearly did not do well last night, and things are getting away from him. It's easy for him to sort of be licking his wounds right now and saying he doesn't want to put himself through that right now. But if it's a month from now and polls show him consistently down, he's going to have to get out there. And we know one thing Donald Trump likes is having attention on himself. So no guarantees, of course, but I imagine he's going to have to, if only because that may be the last thing he can do to try to save his race.
And Maya, I mean, what would the vice president get out of another debate with Trump?
I mean, I think that she would get exactly what she got out of this last one. There is no stronger case, I think, that she can make than to stand on stage with Donald Trump and let people see that split screen comparison of her putting forth real ideas and talking about voters, and him engaging in what seems to be his only move is politics of grievance. It's arguing back and forth with her about, you know, the ways that he has been hurt, and not talking about the people. I don't think there's a more powerful split screen than that.
Yeah, I mean, Brendan, Donald Trump's been traveling this week with Laura Loomer, who has said that 9/11 was an inside job. He brought in Corey Lewandowski as an advisor to the campaign recently. What do you read into this?
Yeah, you know, I don't know that there is really a rock bottom anymore, but we're hovering pretty close to it. I mean, people probably aren't super familiar with this woman, but this is basically the craziest person on the internet that you know is now advising the Republican nominee for president. And it's no wonder that you have a campaign that is engaging daily in conspiracy theories when they're literally flying around with the candidate to the debate. It's obviously deeply embarrassing for the party as a Republican, but also I don't really know exactly what they think they're doing to try to help themselves by engaging in all of these conspiracy theories. Kamala Harris is very clearly trying to win over the undecided voters who are going to determine the outcome of this election, while the Trump campaign and Donald Trump himself seems only to be interested in sort of feeding the fever swamp. We can, I think, throw out the notion that this is a more disciplined campaign, but ultimately it's not about the campaign. It's about this candidate. He thinks that this is the type of person he should be around, and I think it speaks volumes, and I hope that people take notice of it.
And Maya, I mean, how do you see it?
I mean, I think it should be disqualifying. This association should be disqualifying. And I think sometimes it's important to take a step back and think about how this would play out if it were anybody but Donald Trump. Because so often it seems like Donald Trump gets held to a different bar because he does so many horrifying things that nothing seems disqualifying. But this woman is a racist. The comments that she has made about the vice president are disgusting and racist. Full stop. There's no other interpretation. And every reporter with access to Donald Trump should be doing what they would be doing in any other situation, which is asking him to either disavow and condemn those statements, or interpreting that as, if he can't do that clearly and explicitly, then that is him saying, yes, these are sentiments that I am running with and I am running on. And that should be anyone who is still supporting this campaign. That should be a question. Is that the direction? This is the leader of the party. Is that really the direction of the Republican Party? I really think we've got to start treating this the way anyone else would be treated if he were taking advice from somebody this nakedly and disgustingly racist.
And Maya, Harris's campaign, meanwhile, says it has raised $47 million in the 24 hours following the debate. How does the vice president keep this momentum going forward?
I mean, I think, look, big moments like that obviously are going to, people tuned in, they saw what they wanted to see. I think they invest those resources and the huge momentum that they're seeing and keep translating it to getting more people registered and more people ready to go. This is going to be a race that is going to turn on whether or not people are excited enough and enthusiastic enough that they're picking up the phone, that they're calling their friends, that they're making sure people have a plan and go vote. These resources will fuel the ability to run that kind of campaign, and that's going to make the difference.
And Brendan, meanwhile, on the other side, so Trump last night was talking about a new proposal, no taxes on overtime. How does Trump reach out and convince that small sliver of undecided voters that are going to make or break this election? I'm just wondering, can he do that?
Well, his campaign keeps trying to set him up to do those things. I mean, that's a nice idea if you're trying to win over the white working class vote, which they are very focused on, and people in the Midwest. Problem is he can't keep himself disciplined enough, and all of the other crazy things going on with Donald Trump overshadow those things. And it's hard to have a disciplined campaign. Look, if you want to make a case that you are a campaign focused on working people and you're going to be their champion, you need to talk about that with regularity and consistency. Instead, the vice presidential nominee is putting out conspiracy theories, and it gets completely lost. So we've seen this time and time again, where his campaign will set up an event based on what they think is a winning message, whether it's the high price of goods or something on the border. But he's so wildly undisciplined and such a bad candidate that he can't deliver on it. And I think that's an incredible opportunity for the Harris campaign. They've been spending the last few months really trying to introduce Harris and make sure people understand who she is and what she's for. Now that they've got all this money, and I hopefully check that box at the debate, they can go much more on the offense against him and some of the paid media that they're doing and try to take him down a level.